This video is sponsored by DistroKid. Which compression style is better for mixing vocals? Do you compress your vocals gently and transparently, using lower ratios and a slower attack to achieve only a few dB of gain reduction? Or do you instead heavily compress it, using a higher ratio and a faster attack to produce a massive gain reduction? Maybe the best approach is somewhere in between. In this video, we're going to dissect how different compression settings and styles impact a dynamic vocal, and how I'd approach setting each of them up specifically. We're going to explore 3 different compression approaches, which I'll call light, medium, and heavy. While we're of course going to explore the settings required to achieve each one, what we're really listening for is how the settings and overall style of compression influence the final sound. We're going to use the same compressor throughout each example as well, in this case being the Renaissance compressor from Waves, which is a simple yet highly tweakable plugin that gives us access to all of the standard settings such as attack, release, threshold, ratio, and makeup gain. Despite that, what I show you here will translate to pretty much every compressor plugin out there, at least the ones that have the same parameters. And for a fun twist, we'll do a blind shootout at the end to see which of these compression styles we actually prefer. And for a quick summary of these compression styles and how to set them up, grab my free compressor setting cheat sheet linked in the description below. But before we explore these styles of compression and how they impact our vocal sound, let's quickly talk about something else that also impacts your music, being your distributor. And the distributor that many of my clients as well as myself have relied on for years is the sponsor of today's video, DistroKid. With their user-friendly distribution platform available on desktop and mobile, getting your music onto all the major streaming services is easy. But they do more than just distribute your music to stores faster than other distributors. They also give you access to useful tools and features like Instant Share. Whether it's hefty audio files, album artwork, or important documents, DistroKid members can securely store and share up to 1 GB worth of files for free. I often use it to send mixes and instructional videos like this one to clients, and honestly just about anything else that's too big to send as an email attachment. It's super simple to use, but let me show you how it works. Sign up for DistroKid if you haven't already, or log into your account. Upload your files, customize your settings including the password and self-destruct timer, and then copy, paste, and send your file link wherever you please. It's that simple. Get access to Instant Share today by signing up for DistroKid. You can save 7% off your first year by using my link down in the description below. Thank you to DistroKid for sponsoring this video, and now back to the content. So let's talk settings and the difference between these 3 different styles of compression. Each of them has their own intention and at the same time their own settings that produces the unique reaction that we want from each. I've already got 3 compressors set up, each dedicated to the specific style. The first one I want to take a look at is the light compression. The goal of light compression is to subtly even out the level of the vocal, but without drastically altering its character. The general idea of this approach is to compress a vocal transparently, meaning in such a gentle way that it avoids obvious artifacts, adding just a bit more consistency but without doing too much. With that in mind, we have a few specific settings in place. In terms of the ratio, we're typically going to have a lower ratio, ranging from somewhere between 1.5 to 1 and 2 to 1. Now me, in this case, I decided to go for a 2 to 1 ratio. That means for every 2 dB that goes into the compressor and surpasses the threshold, 1 dB will come out, effectively cutting the loudest peaks in half. Next, in terms of the attack, I've set a slower attack time at 160 milliseconds. And even though I've used this setting here, typically your attack can range from anywhere from 50 milliseconds to 500 milliseconds depending on what's appropriate for the material, but the key is having a slow attack, period. A slow attack ultimately delays the compressor's reaction to the initial transients, those sharp, fast peaks, allowing more of their initial energy to pass through before the compression takes effect. This basically preserves the natural dynamics and clarity of the vocal since the compressor won't react right away. In terms of the release, I typically set a medium to fast release, in this case being 26.9 milliseconds. Typically, this is going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 10 to 30 milliseconds in general, and it'll basically allow the compressor to release or let go of the material rather quickly after it falls below the threshold. This effectively avoids unwanted artifacts like pumping, which could happen if you have a very quick release time, such as the fastest setting possible. However, it's not so slow that it's keeping the material compressed for so long. It's not prolonging the compression either. I find this setting is a perfect in-between. Now, the threshold is always going to be unique depending on your track, so in this case, I've set it to about -27, which is allowing me to produce a specific gain reaction. And for light compression, that gain reduction should be somewhere between 1 to 3 dB. In this case, I'm losing upwards of 3 dB, but specifically on those louder peaks, whereas some of the quieter moments are only being reduced by 1 or 2 dB at most. So with the other 2 compressors bypassed for now, let me play this so we can see exactly what this sounds like before and after the compression.
Yeah, is you trying to ride? Is you trying to skate? Is you trying to roll around, forget about your day? Is you try to get out in the middle of the night? I know you've been quarantined whenever you stepped outside. You know I've been rolling around in the deep end. I can pull it to your crib and maybe cut it for a little. You ain't working, it's the heart just started. Okay, it is burning on me. I got burdens on me. Watch it follow slowly. Then I catch and repeat. Got a boulder on my shoulder. Talk to me when you're free. Never mind, I'm a sasso.
So as intended, you can see there's just a small amount of gain reduction, improving the overall consistency of the vocal, still letting some of those transient peaks through, not clamping down too aggressively, and overall producing a more natural sound, one that isn't too heavily compressed or noticeably different from where we initially started. And part of that is thanks to the fact that I'm only adding back a touch of gain. I'm not overdoing the makeup gain either, and you're going to see this consistently happening throughout the other examples. So even though, for example, I am losing upwards of 3 dB, I am only adding back about 1.6 dB, which seem to be roughly matched. And when I bypass and put it in, there isn't a huge difference in loudness, but more so in consistency and just taming those really loud peaks as mentioned. Moving on from the light compression style, let's take a look at the medium compression style that I have set up here. I would say that medium compression is really useful if you want to even out a vocal's dynamics while adding some character at the same time, but avoiding the extremes of heavy compression, which can produce a more distinctive sound. It's almost like the best of both worlds. One of the big differences right off the bat is that we're going to use a higher ratio for this, being a 4:1 ratio. Typically, this will range from about 3:1 to 4:1. I've decided to go with 4:1 in this case. Building on those differences from the previous example, medium compression typically uses somewhat of a medium attack, so not as slow as the previous, but also not too fast so that it's clamping down on the material as well. This is essentially going to be treating those transient spikes once again a little bit more aggressively compared to the previous one, but not so aggressively as you'll see in comparison to the heavy compression we'll talk about in a moment. However, mirroring that previous example as well, the release time is also going to be relatively quick. We're not going to be having the compression linger and keep things compressed for too long. It's essentially going to be letting go of the material, letting it come back to an uncompressed state fairly quickly. You can see that I've had to set my threshold a little bit differently, being at minus 23.5 in this case, in comparison to the light compressor, which was at minus 26. And this is ultimately producing the gain reaction that I want. And that gain reaction is basically a reduction of somewhere between minus 3 and minus 6 dB on average. So if you recall, in the light settings, we're trying to target about a minus 3 dB gain reduction at most. This one is going to be a little bit more aggressive, capping out somewhere around minus 6. And even though we are going to be losing about minus 6, as you'll see in a moment, I am adding back just enough makeup gain to make sure that it is not so noticeable. I'm not setting it to stun. I'm not adding back 6 in this case, but instead around 3.5 seemed to be the appropriate amount to just make up for what we are losing. So with that being said, let me play this track without and with, and you're going to be able to hear the difference.
Yeah, is you trying to ride? Is you trying to skate? Is you trying to roll around, forget about your day? Is you try to get out in the middle of the night? I know you been quarantined when have you stepped outside? You know I've been rolling around in the deep end. I can pull it to your crib and maybe cut it for a little. You ain't working, it's the heart just started. Okay, it is burning on me. I got burdens on me. Watch it follow slowly. Then I catch and repeat. Got a boulder on my shoulder. Talk to me when you're free. Never mind, I'm a sasso.
And you can hear a much bigger increase in the consistency of the vocal performance, and at the same time you can hear a slight change in the frequency response as well, which does make sense. Compression is going to affect different frequencies differently, and what I'm really hearing in this particular case, there's just a little bit more presence in the low end, and of course across the board, but the low end in particular is something that I'm noticing as a result of this style of compression. And at the same time, you can see that at moments we are losing upwards of just beyond 6 dB, which was the target. Of course, that's not happening consistently. There's certainly moments like here where it is not going to be compressing as much, but overall we could hear the difference between the light and medium settings so far. But let's now build from that and look at the heavy compression settings instead. And just like before, we're getting even more aggressive with each step of this process. Now, heavy compression is used when an aggressive and intensely shaped sound is desired. This style of compression drastically alters the sound of a vocal by significantly reducing its dynamic range and usually changing the balance of its frequencies. A lot of times, this can increase the presence and aggression of the upper mid frequencies in particular, which produces a distinctive, noticeably compressed sound. Now, because of that, we're going to go more extreme with our settings in comparison to the previous two examples. Looking at the ratio first, I'm using an 8:1 ratio in this case. That's twice as much as the previous example and 4 times as much as the first example. Really, you can use a ratio from about 8:1 all the way as high as 20:1 or even beyond that if your compressor allows it. But the caveat of that is if you use a ratio at 10:1 or higher, your compressor is essentially going to begin functioning as a limiter, which prevents audio from going above a certain level due to how extreme the settings are. So for that reason, I've kept my ratio around 8:1 on to keep it functioning as a standard compressor. Now, in terms of the attack and release, this is another area where things are a lot different from the previous two examples. With heavy compression, we're typically going to have a much faster attack time, typically as quick as 1 millisecond, but also could be as fast as 10 milliseconds, somewhere in that range. And you can see here that I've set mine to 2.5 milliseconds. This is essentially applying the compression right away, right when it passes the threshold, quickly taming those transients, and ultimately producing a more aggressive reduction overall. With the release, we essentially have two different options. You can either have it set to be very fast or very slow, and each is going to produce a very different result. If you have it set to be very fast, especially when paired with a fast attack as well, you're going to produce a very noticeable pumping effect, and this is something that some people really like. A fast setting would be somewhere between 5 and 10 milliseconds, for example. On the opposite end, if we were to use a very slow release, this would ultimately increase the sustain of the material and produce a more consistent sound overall, resulting in more controlled compression. If you really want to exaggerate the compression, you could set a fast attack and a slow release, and this will basically keep your material compressed for a long time. I'll typically start my compression that way, but eventually bring it to a faster setting to produce a bit of a snappier result that sounds smoother. Now, in terms of the threshold, this is again always going to be unique based on the material, but you can see I have this set to around -23, which is just slightly lower than the previous examples. And of course, I'm doing this to produce a very specific amount of gain reduction. Typically with heavier compression, I'm targeting at least 6 dB of gain reduction, but upwards of 12 dB depending on the moment. And because of the settings that I have here, when I play this, you're going to see that this is very much consistently compressing everything. So for example, it might be compressing the loud peaks by upwards of 10 dB at times, and then the quieter moments that maybe didn't trigger the light compression based on how that was set, it's still going to be triggering the heavy compression in this example by maybe 6 or 7 dB. So what I'm really getting at here is this is basically compressing everything at different amounts, of course, but because of that, it's going to be creating a much more consistent sounding performance. For example, with the light setting, it wasn't necessarily affecting every single part of the vocal performance, whereas this one is affecting almost every part of it. And at the same time, because I'm adding makeup gain, you're not necessarily going to notice the level of compression that's happening. It'll essentially just be bridging the gap between where we started and where we ended up. That being said, let me bypass this, play it, and you can hear the difference.
Yeah, is you trying to ride? Is you trying to skate? Is you trying to roll around, forget about your day? Is you try to get out in the middle of the night? I know you've been quarantined when have you stepped outside? You know I've been rolling around in the deep end. I can pull it to your crib and maybe cut it for a little. You ain't working, it's the heart just started. Okay, it is burning on me. I got burdens on me. Watch it follow slowly. Then I catch and repeat. Got a boulder on my shoulder. Talk to me when you're free. Never mind, I'm a sasso. Yeah, is you trying to ride? Is you trying to skate? Is you trying to roll around, forget about your day? Is you try to get out in the middle of the night? I know you've been quarantined when have you stepped outside? You know I've been rolling around in the deep end. I can pull it to your crib and maybe cut it for a little. You ain't working, it's the heart just started. Okay, it is burning on me. I got burdens on me. Watch it follow slowly. Then I catch and repeat.
This is obviously a very significant difference, especially in comparison to the previous two, and you can see that there's quite a bit of gain reduction in comparison as well, upwards of 10 dB as I mentioned. And I actually even bumped it up a little bit more significantly, so you can hear that pumping type of sound you'll get if you make a really fast release happen, which maybe is preferred on your end, but I definitely prefer a bit more of a smoother compression sound in general, and I like how this is increasing the consistency in general. So now let's do that final comparison that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Just for fairness, I'll be randomizing the sequence of what I'm playing, so you're not exactly hearing light, then medium, then heavy. It's going to be a different order, and that should help randomize our findings and not skew the results. Now, because there's a good chance these are slightly different in terms of loudness, even by just a little bit, I'm going to be using this plugin called Gain Match, which is essentially going to automatically account for level differences from the start of the chain till the end. So any of these plugins, depending on what level it is, it's going to automatically compensate by either adding or taking away a little bit of gain, and this will ensure that we have a fair comparison across the board. And while I played everything in solo mode before, I am going to play it again with everything in context so you can hear the full difference with all the other elements playing as well.
Yeah, is you trying to ride? Is you trying to skate? Is you trying to roll around, forget about your day? Is you try to get out in the middle of the night? I know you've been quarantined when have you stepped outside? You know I've been rolling around in the deep end. I can pull it to your crib and maybe cut it for a little. You ain't working, it's the heart just started. Okay, it is burning on me. I got burdens on me. Watch it follow slowly. Then I catch and repeat. Got a boulder on my shoulder. Talk to me when you're free. Never mind, I'm a sasso. Yeah, is you trying to ride? Is you trying to skate? Is you trying to roll around, forget about your day? Is you try to get out in the middle of the night? I know you've been quarantined whenever you stepped outside. You know I've been rolling around in the deep end. I can pull it to your crib and maybe cut it for a little. You ain't working, it's the heart just started. Okay, it is burning on me. I got burdens on me. Watch it follow slowly, then I catch and repeat. Got a boulder on my shoulder, talk to me when you're free. Never mind, I'm a sasso. Yeah, is you tryna ride? Is you tryna skate? Is you tryna roll around, forget about your day? Is you try to get out in the middle of the night? I know you've been quarantined whenever you stepped outside. You know I've been rolling around in the deep end, thinking I can pull it to your crib and maybe we can cut it for a little. You ain't working, it's the weekend. I just started speaking. Okay, it is burning on me. I got burdens on me. Watch it follow slowly, then I catch and repeat. Got a boulder on my shoulder, talk to me when you're free. Never mind, I'm a sasso. Is you tryna ride? Is you tryna skate? Is you tryna roll around, forget about your day? Is you try to get out in the middle of the night? I know you've been quarantined whenever you stepped outside. You know I've been rolling around in the deep end, thinking I can pull it to your crib and maybe we can cut it for a little. You ain't working, it's the weekend. I just started speaking. Okay, it is burning on me. I got burdens on me. Watch it follow slowly, then I catch and repeat. Got a boulder on my shoulder, talk to me when you're free. Never mind, I'm a sasso.
So before I do the big reveal, pause this video and comment your preferred version down in the comments below. Did you prefer A, B, or C? I'll give you a second to do just that. So now let's get into the results. Well, if you liked A, that means you prefer the medium compression style in this example. B, on the other hand, was the heavy compression style. And C was the light compression style. Of course, everyone's gonna have their own preference, and I'm not gonna lie to you, the material itself will greatly dictate which compression style you prefer, as well as some compression styles are better suited to certain styles of music over others. For example, heavy compression may be more appropriate for aggressive or hardcore sounding music like rock and metal, and not necessarily work as well for genres like pop. Similarly, light compression may be better suited to more dynamic genres like jazz, but not for hip hop where a little bit more control is needed. I know for me, listening to these examples, I definitely preferred the medium and heavy compression style over the light, which is really interesting because in the past, I definitely favored lighter styles of compression more so than anything. So which of these compression styles is ultimately best? Well, that's something for you to experiment and decide in your own tracks. And hopefully seeing me set up these 3 versions of compression have given you what you need to do just that. But compression in general can be really tricky, especially when it comes to vocals. It's easy to make common mistakes that can negatively impact your sound. That's why I made a video covering 9 common vocal compression mistakes that people make, and more importantly, show you how to fix them. I'll leave that on screen for you to watch next right here. Trust me, after watching that, you'll have what you need to avoid these pitfalls and have better sounding vocals almost instantly. If you got value out of the video, please give it a like as it really helps the channel, and consider subscribing if you're new to see more mixing and mastering tips like this in the future. I appreciate y'all for watching and look forward to helping y'all again soon. Peace.
5,